I buried my husband. His law partner handed me a flash drive and said, "He recorded this the night before he died. Watch it alone. Don't let your sister anywhere near it." I didn't understand. Not yet. But 3 hours later, sitting on the bathroom floor of my childhood home in Charlotte, North Carolina, pressing play on my laptop with shaking fingers, I understood everything. And the woman I'd trusted my entire life, my older sister, became someone I no longer recognized. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all. Just a quick note, this story is a fictional narrative with heightened elements created for storytelling purposes. While the names and places are invented, the emotions and lessons are very real. My name is Jenna Whitfield. I was 31 years old and 8 months into a deployment at Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan, when my phone rang at 4 a.m. It was my father-in-law, Douglas. His voice was shaking so badly I could barely make out the words. "Jenna, sweetheart, it's Caleb. He's gone. He collapsed at home last night. They couldn't save him." I sat on the edge of my cot and stared at the wall for a long time after that. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember crying. I just remember the silence, the kind that fills your head when the world stops making sense. Caleb was 33. He didn't smoke. He barely drank. He played basketball every Saturday morning at the YMCA on East Independence Boulevard. 6 weeks ago, he texted me a photo of himself finishing a 10K run, grinning like an idiot, sweat dripping down his face. The caption said, "Training so I can keep up with you when you get home." The death certificate said, "Cardiac arrest. Sudden. Unexplained." I flew home on emergency leave. 22 hours in the air, 2 layovers, no sleep. By the time I landed at Charlotte Douglas International, it was Tuesday afternoon, February 11th. The funeral was the next morning. My parents picked me up at the airport. My mother, Diane, was 63, a retired school counselor who'd spent 30 years helping other people's children, but could never quite hide her own sadness. She hugged me at the curb and held on so long, the cars behind us started honking. My father, Ray, was 67, a former electrician with rough hands and gentle eyes. He took my bag without a word and put it in the trunk. He didn't try to talk. He knew there was nothing to say. The funeral was held at Grace Lutheran Church on Selin Avenue. It was a Wednesday morning, cold and gray, the kind of February day that makes Charlotte feel like a different city. The sanctuary was full. Caleb had been a patent attorney at a small firm downtown, Hargrove and Whitfield, and he'd been the kind of lawyer people actually liked. His clients sent flowers. His colleagues wore black ties and red eyes. Our neighbors from Dilworth, the tree-lined neighborhood south of Uptown where Caleb and I had bought our first house 2 years ago, filled an entire pew. I stood near the back in my dress blues, hands clasped, jaw tight. I watched everyone file in. My parents sat in the second row, my mother clutching a tissue, my father staring straight ahead. Behind them sat Caleb's parents, Douglas and Ruth, both in their mid-60s, both looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. And in the front row on the left side of the aisle sat my older sister, Meredith. Meredith was 38, tall and polished, with honey blonde hair and the kind of posture that made you think she'd been trained for something. She worked as a hospital administrator at Atrium Health Mercy, one of the biggest medical centers in the city. She was wearing a black sheath dress and pearl earrings, and she was sitting perfectly still. Too still, like she was concentrating on something no one else could see. Her husband, Troy, sat beside her. Troy Kincaid was 41, broad-shouldered, with a salesman's smile and a handshake that always lasted a beat too long. He ran a commercial real estate firm in South Park, the kind of business that looked impressive on paper but never quite seemed to make the money it should. He'd been part of our family for 9 years, ever since he and Meredith had married in a ceremony at the Duke Mansion that cost more than my first car. Their daughter Lily was 7. She wasn't at the funeral. Meredith had left her with a neighbor. I remember thinking that was strange. Lily had loved Caleb. He used to let her sit on his shoulders at family barbecues and pretend she was flying. I watched Meredith during the service. She didn't cry. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and stared at the casket like she was doing math in her head. Troy kept touching her arm, whispering something, but she didn't react. She just sat there, still and careful, like a woman trying very hard not to move. After the service, people filed out. I stood by the door and accepted condolences, handshakes, hugs, soft voices saying things like, "He was such a good man," and "We're so sorry, Jenna." I nodded. I thanked them. I felt nothing. Meredith came up to me last. She put her arms around me and held on for exactly 3 seconds. "I'm here for you," she said. "Whatever you need." But her eyes were somewhere else. And when she pulled back, I saw it, just for a second, before she covered it, something that looked like fear. Troy shook my hand. "Anything at all, Jenna. We're family." His smile was too wide. His palm was sweating. I told myself I was imagining things. People grieve differently. Maybe Meredith was in shock. Maybe Troy was just uncomfortable with death. But something about the way they moved, stiff, rehearsed, like actors who'd practiced their blocking, made my skin prickle. And then I saw him. Nolan Faulkner, Caleb's law partner. He was standing near the stained glass window by the side entrance, half hidden in shadow. He was 36, lean and serious, with dark skin and wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of face that didn't give away much. He'd been Caleb's partner at Hargrove and Whitfield for 4 years, and Caleb had trusted him more than almost anyone. Nolan was watching me. Not sadly, not awkwardly, intently. Like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. When I met his eyes, he gave a single small nod. Then he glanced toward the parking lot and back at me. I frowned. He walked toward me, his hands in the pockets of his dark coat. He stopped close, closer than was comfortable, and spoke in a voice so low I almost missed it. "Caleb left something with me. A flash drive. He told me to give it to you if anything ever happened to him." He reached into his breast pocket and pressed a small black USB drive into my hand. He said to watch it alone. And he said, Nolan's jaw tightened. "Don't let your sister anywhere near it." I stared at the drive in my palm. It was warm from his pocket. "What's on it?" "I don't know. He never told me, but he gave it to me 3 weeks ago and he looked scared, Jenna. I'd never seen him like that." Nolan stepped back. "There's more. He left a sealed box in the firm's safe. He told me the code to give you 0928999. That was our wedding date. He said you'd know what to do." Nolan held my gaze. "Be careful." Then he turned and walked away, and I stood there in the emptying church, holding a flash drive that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. And for the first time since I'd gotten the phone call, I felt something sharper than grief. I felt dread. By 2 that afternoon, I was alone in my parents' guest bathroom, sitting on the floor with my laptop balanced on my knees. The door was locked. The fan was on to cover any sound. My hands were shaking as I plugged in the flash drive. 3 files appeared. The first was a video. I clicked play. Caleb's face filled the screen. He was sitting at his desk in our home office, the one with the bookshelves and the framed photo of us at Wrightsville Beach. But he didn't look like the man in that photo. He looked thin, exhausted. His skin had a grayish tint, and there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there in our last video call 3 weeks ago. He looked directly into the camera. "Jenna, if you're watching this, I didn't make it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you while I was still alive. I was afraid that if I did, they'd come after you too." He paused, rubbing his eyes. "I've been sick for about 6 weeks. It started with headaches and nausea, then fatigue, then muscle cramps so bad I couldn't sleep. I thought it was stress. The firm has been busy, and I've been dealing with some things I couldn't tell you about. But then I started noticing a pattern. Every time I got worse, it was after dinner at Meredith and Troy's house, or after Meredith dropped off one of her smoothies. She's been bringing them twice a week, saying she's worried about my health. She said they're packed with vitamins." His voice hardened. "So I went to a private lab, paid cash, didn't use our insurance. The results came back 4 days ago. Thallium. My blood thallium level was 890 nanomoles per liter. Normal is under 10. Someone's been poisoning me, Jenna, and I'm almost certain it's Meredith and Troy. I stopped breathing. The second file was a scanned document, a life insurance policy, $750,000. The policyholder was Caleb Whitfield. The primary beneficiary was me at 70%. The contingent beneficiary at 30% was Meredith Kincaid. I'd never seen this policy before. Caleb had never mentioned it. The third file was a bank statement from Pinnacle Financial, showing a series of transfers from Caleb's account to a joint account belonging to my parents, Ray and Diane Harmon. 6 transactions over 3 months, $28,000 total. None of it authorized by my parents. I sat there on the bathroom floor, staring at the screen, my heart hammering so loud I could hear it over the fan. I picked up my phone and called the number on the card Nolan had given me, not his number, but a number he'd written on the back. A number Caleb had told him to give me. FBI Charlotte Field Office. A woman answered. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Charlotte Division. I need to speak with someone about a murder, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. My husband was poisoned, and I have proof. 40 minutes later, I was sitting in a gray conference room on the 4th floor of the FBI field office on Freedom Drive. The flash drive sat on the table between me and a man in his early 50s, with a shaved head, deep-set brown eyes, and a calm that felt almost surgical. Special Agent Marcus Cole, he said, extending his hand. I understand you believe your husband was murdered. I slid the flash drive across the table. He was poisoned with thallium over a period of 6 weeks. His blood levels were 90 times normal. I believe my sister and her husband are responsible. Cole didn't react. He opened a laptop, plugged in the drive, and began reviewing the files. He read everything slowly, carefully. When he reached the bank statements showing transfers to my parents' account, his eyebrow twitched. Just barely. But he kept reading. After 15 minutes, he looked up. This is significant, he said, but it's not enough to arrest anyone. The blood test is private. The insurance policy is circumstantial, and the transfers to your parents' account, he paused. Those actually complicate things. How? Because from the outside, it looks like your parents might be involved. My stomach dropped. They're not. They don't know anything about this. I believe you. But belief isn't evidence. We need the box your husband left at his law firm, and we need to build a case that can survive a courtroom. Cole assigned 2 agents to the case. Special Agent Priya Desai, a forensic accountant with sharp eyes and a quiet intensity, and Special Agent Tom Gaines, a surveillance specialist with 20 years of field experience. Here's what we're going to do, Cole said. You retrieve the box. You bring us whatever's inside. In the meantime, we start pulling financial records on your sister and her husband. If they're in trouble, we'll find it. And what do? I asked. You act normal. You grieve. You don't let them know you suspect anything. He handed me his card. If anything feels wrong, you call me. Day or night, I drove back to my parents' house in Mint Hill, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from Meredith, checking on you, sis. Troy and I want to come by tomorrow. We can help with Caleb's paperwork. Let us take care of you. I stared at the screen. Then I typed back. That sounds nice. Come over whenever. I set the phone down. My hands were trembling. The next morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Hargrove and Whitfield on South Tryon Street. Nolan met me in the lobby. He didn't ask questions. He just led me to the firm's safe room, a small windowless space behind a records office, and entered the code 092T8-299T. Inside the safe was a metal lockbox. I opened it. 5 items. An audio recording on a micro SD card. A stack of printed bank records with transactions highlighted in yellow. A second video on a separate flash drive. A spreadsheet of IP login records. And 2 receipts, one from a chemical supply company, one from a software vendor. I took everything. Nolan walked me to my car. At the door, he stopped. Caleb spent his last month building this case, he said. He knew he was dying, and he chose to spend that time protecting you and your parents instead of going to the hospital. Why? I whispered. Because he said if he went to the hospital, they'd know he was on to them. And then they'd come for you? I drove to the FBI field office and handed everything to Agent Cole. What followed was 3 hours of evidence review that dismantled every illusion I'd ever had about my family. The audio recording captured Troy and Meredith in their kitchen. Troy's voice was tight, panicked. "I owe them $340,000, Meredith. The guys in Atlanta aren't playing around. They know where Lily goes to school. They sent me pictures." Meredith's voice was cold, controlled. "Then we use the insurance. Caleb's policy pays $750,000. If he dies and Jen is overseas, the payout defaults to us after 90 days. We just need to wait. Troy? And if she comes back early?" A long pause. "Meredith, then we make sure she doesn't file the claim in time." The bank records showed Troy had been gambling online for 2 years. Poker, sports betting, cryptocurrency schemes. He'd lost $340,000, borrowed from people connected to organized crime in Atlanta. And when he couldn't pay, they'd started threatening Lily. In desperation, Troy had embezzled $180,000 from his own real estate firm, hiding it in fake vendor payments. But he still owed $160,000. That's when Meredith had come up with the insurance plan. She'd gotten Caleb drunk at Thanksgiving dinner and convinced him to sign the policy application. She'd forged the doctor's clearance herself. She was a hospital administrator with access to physician signatures and medical letterhead. The policy was approved in December. Then Meredith had started bringing Caleb smoothies, twice a week, loaded with thallium sulfate, a tasteless, odorless poison that causes symptoms identical to the flu. She'd purchased it through an industrial chemical supplier under a fake business name, but she'd paid with Troy's business credit card. Agent Desai pulled up the financial trail on the conference room screen. Troy Kincaid purchased a subscription to a voice cloning service called Echo Voice AI in October. He used it to replicate your father's voice and make fraudulent authorization calls to Pinnacle Financial. Every transfer from Caleb's account to your parents' joint account was confirmed by a phone call from someone the bank believed was Ray Harmon. She pulled up another document. He also forged your father's electronic signature on the bank's authorization forms. The IP logs show every fraudulent login originated from Troy's home network. I felt sick. They framed my parents. Cole nodded. If Caleb hadn't documented the IP addresses and collected the software receipts, your father would be facing federal charges for money laundering right now. We questioned him last week. He had no idea those deposits existed. He was terrified. I closed my eyes. My father, the man who'd spent 40 years crawling through attics and crawl spaces to wire other people's houses, had been dragged into an FBI interrogation because my sister's husband had used his identity to launder stolen money. "Does my dad know he's been cleared?" I asked. "We informed him yesterday," Cole said, "but we didn't tell him why. We couldn't risk Meredith and Troy finding out." Then Cole played the second video. Caleb appeared on screen again. He looked worse than in the first recording. Thinner, paler, his hands trembling. But his voice was steady. "Jenna, this is the last thing I'm going to record. I can feel myself getting weaker. I know what's happening to me, and I know I don't have much time. But I need you to understand something. Your parents are innocent. Meredith and Troy used their account to move money, but Ray and Diane didn't know. I've proven it. Every fraudulent login came from Troy's IP address. Every authorization call was made with cloned audio. I documented everything. Dates, timestamps, IP logs, the software receipt, the bank's call recordings. It's all in the files." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes red. "Don't let them take the blame for what Meredith did. Your dad doesn't deserve that. Your mom doesn't deserve that. They're good people, Jenna. The best people I've ever known. Protect them." He wiped his eyes. "I love you. I wish I could have told you all of this in person. I wish I could have held you one more time. But if you're watching this, it means I ran out of time. So please, finish what I started. Make them answer for what they did." The screen went dark. I sat in that gray conference room and sobbed. Loud, ugly, heaving sobs that I couldn't control and didn't try to. Cole put a hand on my shoulder and didn't say a word. He just let me break. When I could breathe again, I looked up. "So what now?" Cole's expression was grim. We have strong evidence, but most of it was gathered by a private citizen. Meredith's attorney will challenge admissibility. What we need is a confession, something recorded under controlled conditions that removes all doubt. You want to set a trap, I said. I want to give you a choice, Cole said. If you're willing to wear a wire, we can arrange a meeting. Get them talking. Get them on record, but it's dangerous. If they realize what's happening, I'll do it, I said. Cole studied me. You're sure? My husband spent his last weeks dying in our house, alone, collecting evidence to save my parents. The least I can do is sit in a room with my sister and ask her why. Cole nodded. We'll set it up for Saturday. That same evening, 15 miles across Charlotte in a brick colonial on Barclay Downs Drive, Meredith Kincaid stood in her kitchen holding her phone, her face white. Troy sat at the island, a glass of bourbon in front of him. She went to the FBI, Meredith said. I saw an unmarked car outside her parents' house this morning. Troy's hand tightened around the glass. How do you know it was FBI? Because I'm not stupid, Troy. Government plates. 2 men in suits. They were watching the house. Troy stood up and paced to the window. We need to move. Take the money we have left and disappear. We can't run. Meredith's voice was sharp. If we run, they'll know. And the men in Atlanta will find us before the FBI does. They still want their money. Then what do we do? Meredith set her phone down. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, we need to know what Jenna has. If Caleb left something behind, files, recordings, anything, we need to find it before she gives it to the feds. And if she's already given it to them? Troy looked at her. Meredith's expression didn't change. Then we need to make sure she can't testify. Troy stared at her. You're talking about... I'm talking about surviving, Meredith said. It's her or us. It's her or Lily. The room went quiet. Troy looked down at his bourbon, then back at his wife. After a long moment, he nodded. I didn't know any of that yet. I didn't know my sister was sitting in her kitchen planning how to silence me, but I knew something was wrong. I could feel it, the same instinct that had kept me alive during 2 deployments, the same gut sense that had saved my life in Okinawa when a training exercise went sideways. My sister was afraid, and afraid people are dangerous. Saturday came slowly. The FBI spent Thursday and Friday installing cameras in my parents' house. Living room, kitchen, hallway, front porch, back door. Wireless audio and video transmitting to a surveillance van parked on Meadowbrook Lane, 1 street over. Agent Gaines ran the tech. Agent Desai monitored from the van. 6 tactical agents positioned in unmarked vehicles around the block. My parents were moved to a hotel downtown, the Marriott on West Trade Street. My father didn't want to leave. He stood in the driveway with his arms crossed and his jaw set. I don't like this, Karen Jenna, he said. He always called me Karen when he was worried. My middle name. I know, Dad. But I need you and Mom safe. My mother hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. You call us the second it's over. I will. Saturday evening, I clipped the microphone under my collar, slipped the panic button into my pocket, and sat on the couch in my parents' living room. The house was quiet. The cameras were live. Cole's voice came through the earpiece. We're in position. You're not alone. At 8:15, I texted Meredith. Hey, can you and Troy come by? I found some of Caleb's paperwork and I'm confused about a few things. Could use your help. Her reply came in 2 minutes. Of course. We'll be there by 9. At 8:58, headlights swept across the front window. At 8:58, headlights swept across the front window. At 8:59, a car door closed. At 9:09, the doorbell rang. I stood up. My heart was hammering. I walked to the door, took a breath, and opened it. Troy stood on the porch in a leather jacket, hands in his pockets. Behind him, Meredith stood very still, her purse clutched against her side. She looked pale, controlled, careful. Hey, sis, Meredith said. Her voice was soft, concerned, practiced. How are you holding up? I'm managing. Come in. They stepped inside. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. We sat in the living room. Troy took the armchair. Meredith sat on the living room. Troy took the armchair. Meredith sat on the love seat, her purse on her lap. I sat across from them, my hands folded, the microphone burning against my collarbone. "So," Troy said, leaning back with practiced ease, "you said you found some paperwork?" "Yeah." I kept my voice casual. "Caleb had a life insurance policy I didn't know about. $750,000. $750,000. I'm listed as the primary beneficiary." Troy's smile didn't waver. That's great, Jenna. That'll help you get back on your feet." "What's strange," I continued, "is that Meredith is listed as the contingent beneficiary. At 30%. Meredith's expression didn't change. "Caleb asked me. He wanted to make sure the family was covered if something happened to you overseas. Did he?" I tilted my head. "Because there's a clause in the policy that says if I don't file the claim within 90 days, the full amount goes to the contingent. And I've been stationed in Japan for 8 months. Meredith uncrossed her legs. "Standard insurance language, Jenna. Right." I paused. "Except I also found bank statements showing $28,000 transferred from Caleb's account into Mom and Dad's joint checking, transfers they never authorized. And every single one was confirmed by a phone call from someone who sounded exactly like Dad. But it wasn't Dad. It was a voice clone." The room went very still. Troy's smile disappeared. Meredith's hands tightened on her purse. "I know about the thallium," I said. "I know about the gambling debt. I know about the $180,000 Troy embezzled. I know about the men in Atlanta, and I know that you've been poisoning my husband for 6 weeks with smoothies laced with thallium sulfate that you bought from an industrial chemical supplier and paid for with Troy's business credit card." Meredith's face went white. "Jana, the FBI has everything," I said. "Caleb recorded you. He tracked the IP addresses. He found the software receipts. He built the entire case before he died." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Meredith turned to Troy, and something passed between them, a look, a decision. Troy stood up fast. Meredith reached into her purse and pulled out a syringe, a needle filled with clear liquid. Her hand was shaking, but her grip was tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "They're going to kill Lily. They send photos of her school. I don't have a choice, Jenna. I don't have a choice. FBI, drop it. Drop it now." The front door burst open. Cole came through first, weapon drawn, 2 agents behind him. The back door crashed inward simultaneously. Gaines and Desai, tactical vests, guns raised, hands in the air. "Now!" Troy lunged for the hallway. I pivoted, grabbed his arm, twisted it behind his back, close quarters training, drilled into my muscles over 3 deployments, and drove him face first into the wall. He crumpled. Meredith screamed and swung the syringe toward me. I caught her wrist, squeezed hard, and stripped it from her hand. It clattered to the hardwood floor. She collapsed, sobbing. Cole was on Troy in seconds, cuffing him. Desai secured Meredith. "Meredith Kincaid," Cole said, his voice flat and final, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and the poisoning death of Caleb Whitfield. You have the right to remain silent. Troy Kincaid, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft." They were hauled to their feet. Troy looked at me with wild eyes. "You set us up." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I did." Meredith, still sobbing, whispered as they led her past me. "Tell Lily I love her. Please, tell her I'm sorry." I didn't answer. The house emptied. Cole stayed behind. He handed me a gauze pad. I hadn't even noticed the scratch on my forearm where Meredith's nails had caught me during the struggle. "You did good," he said. I looked at the syringe on the floor, at the overturned chair, at the scuff marks on the wall where Troy had fallen. I didn't feel good. I felt hollow. "What was in the syringe?" I asked. "We'll test it," Cole said. "But based on the concentration of thallium Caleb's toxicology showed, I'd guess it was a lethal dose." "My sister brought a lethal injection to kill me," I said. The words sounded impossible, like a sentence from someone else's life. "Yes," Cole said, "she did." I sat down on the couch and pressed the gauze against my arm and stared at nothing. 6 weeks later, the trial began at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse on East 4th Street. I sat in the front row beside my parents. My father held my mother's hand. Behind us sat Nolan Faulkner, his face drawn but steady. The prosecution presented everything: the audio confession, the thallium purchase records, the voice cloning software, the bank fraud, the IP logs, the dashcam video, the FBI surveillance footage. The jury watched Caleb's final video in complete silence. 2 jurors wiped their eyes. 3 more looked at Meredith with undisguised contempt. Meredith's defense argued duress, that Troy had dragged her into the scheme, that the threats against Lily had left her no choice. But the prosecutor asked one question that ended it. "Mrs. Kincaid, did you ever go to the police?" "No." "Did you ever warn Caleb Whitfield that his life was in danger?" "No." "Did you ever refuse to add thallium to the smoothies you brought to his home?" A long pause. Then, quietly, "No." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Both defendants, Troy Kincaid was sentenced to life without parole. Meredith Kincaid received 35 years. Before sentencing, I stood and faced my sister. "You taught me how to braid my hair when I was 6, I said. "You drove me to prom when Dad's truck broke down. You were the first person I called when Caleb proposed." I looked at her, really looked at her, one last time. "You killed my husband. You poisoned him slowly for 6 weeks while he sat across from you at dinner and trusted you. And when I started asking questions, you came to our parents' house with a needle full of poison to kill me too." My voice cracked. "You're not my sister anymore. You're a stranger who looks like someone I used to love." I turned and walked back to my seat. My father pulled me close. My mother was crying. Outside the courthouse, the March air was cool and clean. Nolan stood on the steps, hands in his pockets. "What happens to Lily?" he asked. "Caleb's parents," I said. "Douglas and Ruth. They've already filed for temporary custody. She'll be with people who love her." Nolan nodded. "Good." My mother stepped forward and put her hand on Nolan's arm. "Thank you," she said, "for everything you did for Caleb, for everything you did for our family." He smiled, small, tired, real. He was my best friend. I wish I could have done more. 3 days later, I went to Caleb's grave at Sharon Memorial Park. The headstone was simple white marble. Caleb James Whitfield, 1991-2002-5. Beloved husband, son, and friend. I knelt and placed a bunch of sunflowers against the stone. He'd always loved sunflowers against the stone. He'd always loved sunflowers. Said they were the only flowers stubborn enough to face the sun all day. "Hey, babe," I said softly, "it's over." Troy got life. Meredith got 35 years. They're never getting out. The wind moved through the trees. Lily's with your parents. She's safe. She's confused and she's hurting, but she's safe. Your mom's already teaching her to bake cookies. Your dad took her to the park yesterday. She's going to be okay. My throat tightened. I think about you every day. The way you laughed. The way you made terrible puns and thought they were hilarious. The way you held me like you were afraid I'd float away. I miss all of it. I traced his name with my fingertips. You spent your last weeks on this earth dying in our house, alone, building a case to protect my parents. You could have gone to the hospital. You could have called me, but you knew if you did, Meredith would run, and my parents would take the fall. So you stayed, you fought, you gave me everything I needed to finish this. I stood up and brushed the dirt from my knees. I love you, Caleb. I always will. I turned and walked toward the parking lot, where my parents were waiting by the car. My mother reached for my hand. My father put his arm around my shoulders. We stood there for a moment, the 3 of us, broken but together, and for the first time in 3 months, I felt something other than grief. Not happiness, not yet, but something close to it, something warm and stubborn, like a sunflower turning toward the light. Hope. Looking back now, I want to say something to anyone watching who's been through something like this, or who's afraid they might be. Family betrayal is the deepest wound there is. It doesn't just break your trust in one person. It makes you question every relationship you've ever had, every hug, every "I love you," every memory. But here's what I've learned. The people who betray you don't define your family. The people who stand beside you do. My parents, who sat in that courtroom every single day. Nolan, who kept Caleb's secret and put himself at risk to give me the truth. Douglas and Ruth, who lost their son and still opened their home to a 7-year-old girl who needed them. That's family. Not blood. Not obligation. Choice. If something feels wrong, if someone you love starts acting strange, if money disappears, if stories don't add up, trust your instincts. Don't wait for proof. Caleb waited, and it cost him his life. And if you're hurting right now, if betrayal has left you shattered and you don't know how to put the pieces back together, I want you to know, you will. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will. Thank you for walking this journey with me. I'd love to hear from you. What would you do if you discovered someone in your own family had done something unforgivable? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. A quick reminder, while this story draws from real themes of financial desperation and family crime, certain elements have been heightened for dramatic impact. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.